Deltaweek Day 1. Deltaweek being an event I made up just now, where you upload a video every day from the 28th of October through November 1st in honor of Deltarune's anniversary. Also, if you clicked on this video, I'm going to assume you've experienced both routes of Deltarune Chapter 2, and that you're reasonably familiar with the discussion and theories surrounding them. This video is mostly for the more obscure things that you might not find in other videos. Sans Blind Spot. Deltarune's Sans fits the Sans formula perfectly. Everything surrounding him is a confusing mystery, and he obviously knows way more than he should. His dialogue and sprites even imply that he knows what's going on when you play Chapter 2 without a Chapter 1 save. Yet, 90% of what he says and does can't be taken even remotely seriously. But, even accounting for this, he seems to have one relatively huge blind spot: the Dark World. Now, even though in Deltarune itself he hasn't indicated this at all, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he knows that the Dark World exists. But he seems to have no idea what you do there, even if you do a no mercy run. For Chapter 1, this makes sense. You can't level up no matter what you do, so Sans doesn't react because there's nothing to react to. Chapter 2, however, is different. You can level up, and, though perhaps not yourself, you can actually eliminate people in the Dark World. Not to mention what you do to Birdly and how you affect Noelle. But this, too, actually makes sense. You have to remember Sans isn't omniscient. He's just clever and knows how to do things like check stats. As far as we can tell, though, stats in the Dark World don't affect the Light World at all, so he wouldn't learn anything that way. It's very unlikely, if not impossible, that he was somewhere in the Dark World with us, so he wouldn't know about the Frozen Darkeners. And there's no reason he would have seen Noelle or Birdly before we talked to him. But there's still one way he could technically still be onto us in the Snowgrave route. Noelle makes it clear that as the Snowgrave route progresses, the player's voice and Kris's voice become distinct somehow, but nobody else notices. However, even though nothing changes, perhaps Sans notices our voice when we pick dialogue options when talking to him? Obviously there's no proof, but it is worth thinking about. Eggs. Speaking of Sans, I have a little, completely inconsequential theory. Okay, in Chapter 1, when you put the egg in Asgore's fridge, it duplicates, possibly absorbing the pickles to do so. In Chapter 2, Sans has a basket of identical, loose eggs, and Asgore has some sort of free pickle deal. I think Asgore traded infinite eggs for infinite pickles. Who can create a fountain? Without any digging, Chapters 1 and 2 tell us that the Knight and any Lightner who's determined enough can create a fountain. But is this true? Or at least, is it misleading? If creating a fountain is linked to determination like the Queen says, then only humans and maybe Undertale's Undyne should be able to create one. And probably Gaster for Gaster reasons, but we're not talking about him right now. But if it wasn't even possible for him to succeed, why would Ralsei stop Birdly with such urgency and distress? Well, this moment when Ralsei thinks Birdly is about to create a fountain is the second time he shows ignorance about how monsters work. From Undertale, we know that monsters don't have blood and they don't have determination. But based on his reactions, or lack thereof, in Chapters 1 and 2, Ralsei doesn't know this. But what if Deltarune's world just works differently? Well, it doesn't. To be fair, we can't be certain about determination, but we know monsters don't have blood in Deltarune because of one tiny bunny monster in Hometown who asks Kris, "Does it hurt to be made of blood?" So then, back to the question, who can create a fountain? Here's what we have. The only two we can be absolutely certain of are Kris and the Knight, who may actually be the same person, but probably aren't. Behind those two are Noelle, Birdly, and Susie, in that order. Noelle because she was the Queen's main candidate, Birdly because it looks like he was actually getting ready to do it, and Susie simply because she seems like the determined type. But in reality, probably none of them can do it. Danger, Homestuck Zone. Skip ahead if you're weak. If not, In this section, I'll tell you about all the connections or references to Homestuck in Deltarune Chapter 2. I want to be clear that I don't think these actually mean anything. I don't think Kris and the gang are going to start playing Spurb, but I think there are an oddly high number of similarities. The Dave-Kris connection. There's a striking number of similarities between Kris and Dave Strider, summed up in this handy chart I made. Face. Both have a straight-line mouth and hidden red eyes. Swords. Both wield them, but it goes much deeper than that. In Sweet Cap'n Cake's shop, you can buy the Mecha Saber, which has the description, "Press hilt to extend." This is extremely reminiscent of Dave Strider's most iconic sword, Khaled Scratch, which can be extended at will through time manipulation. Furthermore, you can buy a broken sword from Spamton's shop, and while you can't equip it, it still brings to mind Dave's affinity for broken swords. It's not on the chart, but it's worth mentioning that at one point Dave wields the Snoop Dogg Snow Cone Machete, which can freeze enemies in a block of ice, a fact which seems pretty relevant now. Knight of Time. In Homestuck, Dave has the title Knight of Time. Knight is a class in the RPG-like system in Homestuck, and time is the element, or aspect, he has power over. Connecting Kris to time is easy. They manipulate it through save and load. But Knight is a bit more complicated. We can do it in two ways. 1. Based on Chapter 2's ending, Kris is either the Knight or following in their footsteps. 2. Servitude. In Homestuck, a Knight serves their aspect or serves others through their aspect. We're only interested in the second. Serving others through time could apply to Kris in two ways. A. In battle, they make sure Susie, Ralsei, or Noelle survive and win battles by rewinding time if they lose. B. They serve us, the player. It's unclear if the ability to save and load comes from us or Kris, though. Reluctant Hero. Both Dave and Kris are reluctant heroes. Dave of the more typical variety, and Kris because the player is forcing them to play the hero no matter what they actually want. And then we have the two little points at the bottom. One saying that Kris is a valid kid name. This is just referring to the fact that all of Homestuck's human characters have 4-letter names, and Kris fits the pattern. The other is that they both meet copies or different versions of their brothers, Dave with Dirk and Kris with Ralsei. The Susie Terezi connection. This connection is much weaker than the Kris-Dave one, but it's worth mentioning. Both characters eat chalk, both are violent yet ultimately good guys, and both are non-human. One last point is that in Homestuck, at least the beginning, Terezi talks most to Dave, connecting Susie's parallel to Kris's parallel, strengthening them both. Queenstuck. The Queen shares one or two traits with a few Homestuck characters. She has a personality similar to Roxy Lalonde, specifically Drunk Roxy. She has Kanaya's typing quirk, which is to say capitalizing every word. And, third and finally, her design is very mildly reminiscent of her imperious condescension, as shown on screen now. And then, lastly, a little lightning round. 1. The missing green crayon in the drawer at home could possibly be a reference to the mayor, who likes to eat green things. 2. Toby himself said in the recent Deltarune Chapter 1 livestream that Alphys glasses were inspired by John, or June, Egbert. 3. The battery acid pie / Gamer's Delight looks very much like Gamzee's Soper Slime pies. 4. What seems like Homestuck symbols are in the shadow puzzle in the Queen's mansion, the most noticeable being the house, Homestuck's logo. And 5, Spamton looks a bit like Lil Cow. But then again, that's likely just because they're both probably derived from Jigsaw. Okay, you're safe now. No more Homestuck, I promise. Ralsei. Sus for a reason. A great number of people noticed during their playthroughs that Ralsei is acting a bit off. I'm sure you're well aware of all the reasons why by now, but the main two are what get me thinking. His complete brush off of Spamton and all the puppet talk, and how he's pushy about trying to get us to see what Noelle and Susie are doing. Not to mention him being the one who knows about everything important, even the stuff he shouldn't know about at all, like the ability to save and buttons on the player's keyboard. I think he knows more than he's letting on, and I think he will betray us. But note that key word, us. He's not going to betray Kris and Susie, he's going to betray us, the player. I can't even begin to imagine how, but to me it seems clear that he knows about us, but is trying to seem completely normal. To me, this perfectly explains why the all-knowing, all-caring Ralsei would completely brush off the puppet talk despite a shaking and yelling Kris like he does after Spamton. He doesn't want to anger the puppet masters, or at least he doesn't want to make them suspicious. If you're not convinced, think about this. After the moment we see Kris for the first time, the only reason we ever leave them is when they tear their own soul out, or when Ralsei tells us to look somewhere else. The only person to talk to Kris without us controlling them is Ralsei, and he seems to be intentionally creating these opportunities. Minecrap. Something Spamton says while becoming Neo in the Snowgrave route. This is a reference to an over 9-year-old video called Minecraft with Gadget, where a guy and Inspector Gadget review Minecraft. This is just me, but I was surprised to see this reference, because I was already thinking of the video when I first met Spamton in my playthrough, because the voice in Spamton's theme sounds like Inspector Gadget. Here, listen.
I'm having a lot of fun. You can shut up now.
Dark World Sans. If we ever see a Dark World Sans, I just think it'd be funny if he was exactly the same, but had his Smash Bros. Arm blaster. Time and Dark Worlds. After all of that getting into the details and obscure corners of things, we've overlooked one big thing. How does time work in the Dark Worlds? And I don't mean like a Narnia situation. From what we have, it seems like time spent in the Dark World and time spent in the Light World is a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm talking about how these Dark Worlds have entire histories spanning way longer than the 24 hours maximum that they could have existed. There's only one good answer that was posed by someone in their playthrough, but unfortunately I don't remember who. It might have been Dako. It's simply that the purpose and history of the room and the items in it are converted into a world, people, and creatures. It's a really good idea, and almost certainly right to some degree, but there's one problem. If it were true, and the Queen was created after the Dark World in the closet was already destroyed, how would Lancer, the King, and Jevil know her? Furthermore, on the topic of the Queen, why is she a computer? Shouldn't her real-world object be a playing card? I know she's in a computer lab, but Rules and Lancer don't become part computer when they enter the cyber world. They become stone. Which reminds me, if the Queen is from the closet Dark World, how is she not a statue? And if she is a playing card, why is there one loose card in the computer lab? I don't have answers to any of these questions, but perhaps you do. Leave a comment with your theories, please. Also, another question for you to try and answer in the comments. What did Asgore do to get removed from the police force and divorced by Toriel? I seriously doubt he started doing what he did in Undertale because he didn't like that. He did that out of necessity. What did he do in Deltarune? Everything's fine.